The problem when you comment it under something that is important, even if you don't think it's as important, but is important, is that you take up all the space that could be used to engage in all manner of different things, and instead just throw it at, oh, pay attention to this thing that exists. Spread awareness of this one thing that exists. So you undermine all these other important things going on because in your head, it's not possible to focus on two things at once. Celebrity politics do have importance. Thinking about them and talking about them, writing about them, giving them attention, God forbid, does not preclude you from talking about the Epstein files, from talking about Sudan. It does not preclude you from getting engaged in local politics. And again, many of the people who do engage in local politics might also have a pretty strong opinion about Taylor Swift. And I think that would blow your mind if you engaged with them. So, we're going to talk about 3 celebrities today, 2 of which you have probably heard everything about in the past 2 or 3 weeks. One of which, not so much. So that's a bit of a surprise candidate, but not necessarily also subject of conversation. What am I talking about? Obviously, we're going to talk about Taylor Swift today, and we're going to talk about not only the opinion article that came out in The Guardian about Taylor Swift, which criticizes Taylor Swift for being silent on how the Trump administration is using her music. Alim Karaj criticizes her for this. The other person we're going to be talking about is Jennifer Lawrence, who recently put out a statement about not knowing if she should speak out about politics outside of her art, and the uncomfortable position celebrities can be in. And then, of course, we're going to talk about Sydney Sweeney, who we've talked about on this channel before, same as Taylor Swift. Every time you talk about these things, people get in a tizzy, and you'll see sort of why. Because the Reddit threads about these celebrities are essentially very critical of any progressives online that are giving attention and criticizing somebody like Taylor Swift for her approach to the Trump administration, her choice in friends, etc. And the Jennifer Lawrence comments were actually received pretty warmly online as well. I get her at this point. I'm exhausted too. We'll get into it. But before we even get into the text, go past the headlines, tackle these comments, maybe dunk on some Redditors, I want to start on a more personal note. Every time you have these conversations, there is an emphasis on the idea that we are always focusing on celebrities when it comes to politics instead of focusing on more important things, instead of focusing on activists, instead of focusing on politicians, instead of calling politicians whatever. And every time I cover these things, people are always very cynical. They're always skeptical. Why do you talk about celebrities when you should be talking about this more important stuff? Policy, you should be talking more about war, whatever. And I think we have to have a discussion about, first of all, false dichotomies, because not everybody who's going to talk about Taylor Swift and her politics, her lack of a stance on Gaza, her, jet fuels, not all those people are going to be people who only talk about Taylor Swift and don't engage with politics. In fact, many of those people are going to be people who are interested from the ballot box to local politics to more discussions on social media about more important things. They're going to be people who are engaged with politics. So this assumption that anybody who talks about this stuff just doesn't care enough about the real issues, it's a false dichotomy. You can do 2 things at once. But moreover, I think we have to reevaluate what we think counts as politics. I think there's a lot, first of all, that happens as a result of political and social issues, especially to marginalized folks, that we seem to think isn't important, or we just don't hear about at all until either it's too late or until it's presented to us in a form or fashion that we can stand by or praise. What I mean by that is, when I had the conversation about Sydney Sweeney and her American Eagle ad months ago, and people were dismissing it as chronically online discourse, saying people were being ridiculous, I brought up the reality, because it is a reality, that Black and brown girls go to high school in this country. Black and brown femmes go to high school, they go to middle school, they go to junior high, and they're surrounded, oftentimes, by white girls and white boys, and people who have their whole view of aesthetics and beauty shaped by pop culture, by films, by advertisements. They can be ostracized because of those things. They can be otherized because of those things. They can be bullied because of those things. The simple fact is, there is a girl out there who is getting bullied by white girls based off of the Sydney Sweeney American Eagle ad. There are girls that are going to tease her talking about my jeans are blue. There are going to be girls that make her feel uncomfortable because they show this overt support for Sydney Sweeney and other white celebrities who had these right-wing politics. And surprise, surprise, by the way, Sydney Sweeney's a registered Republican. That's a whole thing. They have to live with the way that these white celebrities use their platforms. And so it might not look to you like anything's happening. It might not look to you like these things are actually important. But they are. They are for people who we traditionally marginalize, which is children. We never listen to children. We never care about children. Pop culture is targeted for children. It's targeted for people between the ages of 10 and 18, young adults as well. Those people are marginalized. Women are marginalized. Non-binary folks are marginalized. Queer folks are marginalized. Black and brown folks are marginalized. And all these intersections are ignored because that's not real politics. Oh, but real politics is if I, propose a budget, or I read abundance, or, I say a bunch of things about socialism online. Real politics is I go and I vote once a year. Maybe I call a politician sitting in office and I give them some words about how they should do something different. All these things are politics, yeah? And so is people getting bullied because of social standards being reinforced by pop culture and hegemony. And if you don't think that that's important, then first of all, I don't think that's cool. I think that's actually messed up, because are these people not human? When we talk about progressive politics, if you claim to care about that stuff so much, if you claim to care about socialism so much, or just any progressive reforms, then surely you would say that you care about 13, 14, 15-year-old little girls, young women, young girls. Surely you would say you care about high school kids because they're humans and they exist in the country you live in the world you live in, right? You care about them, right? So why are you choosing to dismiss the importance of things that foundationally shape their everyday lives? Now, that's obviously not to say that celebrity discourse is the most important thing. I'm not sure anybody would argue that that's the case, but it's patently, it's absurd to act like that stuff doesn't matter to anyone. And if it matters to someone, even if those people seem to be peripheral to you, even if your assumptions are true, which they're not, that this amount of people who are affected by these things is a very minute amount of people, even if that were true, that still matters. And that's because politics and getting stuff done, creating change, is the process of consistently doing over and over again things that don't seem to have very much effect at all. Do you know what I mean? Like, one vote doesn't shape the presidential election. So it might seem really dumb to vote at all because it's just one vote. Oh, but you don't use that logic when it comes to voting. You don't use that logic when it comes to local board meetings. You don't use that logic when it comes to protests, but you use that logic when it comes to online activism, hacktivism, slacktivism, whatever, towards celebrities. Now all of a sudden it's obviously pointless. I really think that this is a kind of argument, even though it often comes from a good place and sometimes is even pretty fair of a critique. Most of the time, this argument that celebrity politics aren't important is basically a psyop. It's essentially like state-sponsored capitalist propaganda 101. Don't pay attention to the people behind the screen. Don't pay attention to the people that literally shape your desires, your desirability politics, that shape your aesthetic politics, that shape what you think is cool, what products you buy, that shape how your children are affected at school, how your nieces and nephews are affected at school. Don't pay attention to the politics of any of those people, and don't pay attention to all the money that goes into their pockets and who's paying them and why they might take certain political stances because of that. Taylor Swift, yeah, some people will say, yeah, Taylor Swift, you should critique her about maybe the things that she does with her private jets and how much environmental damage that has. You could even critique her for the people she affiliates with, but critiquing her for not commenting about these songs being used or whatever the case might be, that's just pointless. And yet those things are very connected. Lord Christian says, we've never as a collective species been able to agreeably define what real politics are, yet find the aspects of whatever we do as individual people as definitively not real politics every day. And this is what I mean by political education when I talk about certain people not being politically educated. And this is personally very important to me because I was one of those people who grew up in this country. Frankly, I think everybody fits this category, who was affected by pop culture, who was affected by celebrities. Because I was compared to celebrities. I was mocked based off of depictions of Asian people on screens. Issues that affected me in my home country were ignored because there was no representation for it in popular media. So nobody spoke to me. Nobody knew where the Dominican Republic was on the map. So they wouldn't know what would have happened to family back home. They wouldn't have known about the history of colonialism in the Dominican Republic. They barely knew about where Haiti was until the Haiti earthquake happened, and they barely cared then. All this stuff shapes politics. All this stuff is important. To act like there's just one place where you do politics and everywhere else there is not important is actually miseducation on what politics is. And so not only from my own personal experience as being a person growing up in this country, but from the perspective of a journalist who cares about theory, political theory, social theory, who cares about covering social issues. Yeah, this is the fulcrum of my project. My project is I want to politically educate people. And one of the main things that you do, that you learn when you get a political education, it's a Paulo Freire concept, right? Everything can be political. Everything can be politicized. Everything can be a foundational part of your political education. There does not exist a single thing that exists in the social world that isn't in some way political, that isn't in some way important. And to dismiss people's concerns and criticisms as unimportant is just doing the work of the depoliticizers for them. You're just aiding in that depoliticization goal. And when you depoliticize people, you make them easier to govern, to dominate, to oppress. So you've got to wake up in this sense, right? This is what being woke means sometimes. It means saying things that people are going to say are infinitesimal, are not important, are silly, because you see the deeper meaning. You see the bigger picture behind it. So that's my preamble. Matt Barron says, my thing is I'm not impacted by celebrities because I don't think they're cool. Celebrities are lame, and because I personally ignore their influence, I don't think it matters to me. I think that kind of makes sense, but it also ignores, first of all, how celebrities affect the people around you. Second of all, celebrities, that's a very wide category to describe a whole bunch of different people. Really, we're talking about artists. You know, when we talk about Taylor Swift, Sydney Sweeney, when we talk about Jennifer Lawrence, these are artists, whether they're musicians, actors, directors. They create art. And if you don't think celebrity culture is important, or you don't really care necessarily about the personal lives of public figures, you probably care about art. Well, these are the people that produce art, that shape art. And that's important. Oh, the irony of listing intersections, insisting people notice them all, and not mentioning ableism. I mean, I've mentioned ableism from previous conversations, and this is a huge part of it as well. It's the fact that disability does not get highlighted or gets marginalized in many significant ways, and celebrity politics does have an impact on that. If you had celebrities that did more, for instance, for COVID awareness, for spreading awareness about masking, donating their resources to mask blocks, for donating, air purifiers. If you had that, then that would have an impact. I promise you it would have an impact. Even if you think that impact is small, that's just how politics works. It's always going to look small to somebody else. To you, what's happening in the city of Mombasa in Kenya in a local election is unimportant. It's small, it's tiny. But in reality, it's obviously very important to the people that live there. Everything is tiny from the perspective of somebody who's not particularly close to it or particularly interested in it. So all this is to say, when we talk about these folks and we talk about the praise that some of them are going to get for disengaging with politics, just know that this is the system working as intended. This is the reality that's created by people essentially being made to not think that much. So we'll start here with this pop culture chat subreddit post, okay? You'll notice there's a lot of tendencies here, but obviously we're going to be using Reddit on these just to look at how there's a lot of, it's a way to organize large conversations. But obviously these subreddits have different opinions. So pop culture chat will be one, but faux moi is a separate subreddit that has other opinions. They represent bubbles on the internet. Obviously, they're not representative of real life. But you know where you can find a representation of what real people think in the real world? Nowhere, because people are different. I've met many people in the real world who share the opinions of people that would have been considered chronically online. That's how it works. So Taylor Swift's silence on the Trump administration using her music speaks volumes. This is from The Guardian. This has a lot of upvotes. So back to this Guardian article. Taylor Swift's music has been used in multiple posts from the Trump campaign on different social media accounts. 3 posts in particular are highlighted here. One on TikTok using The Fate of Ophelia, a song that I have beef with. The second and third were posted by Team Trump, the official account for the Trump campaigns. One set to Father Figure, riffing on the lyric, "This empire belongs to me," with the caption, "This empire belongs to President Donald J. Trump," while the other, celebrating Melania Trump winning something called the Patriot of the Year award, is soundtracked by the song Opalite. There are multiple artists who have come at the Trump administration for using their music in the past without permission, including Isaac Hayes, Celine Dion, Beyonce, Rihanna, ABBA, Foo Fighters. And as this article points out, most recently Olivia Rodrigo condemned the Trump administration after the official Department of Homeland Security and White House Instagram account used her song All American Bitch on a video promoting its controversial deportation efforts. The song was later removed by Instagram. But as they point out, Swift, however, has said nothing in public. And, important context, the silence is surprising from an artist known to be litigious over unsanctioned use of her music or likeness. The Evermore thing, there's interesting context there in terms of the theme park that she sued for playing her music without a license, but she did do that. You can check out the Jenny Nicholson video about Evermore for more details on that. She's come for Etsy sellers for using lyrics from her songs in unofficial merch. She's taken on YouTube creators over copyright infringement and demanded retroactive songwriting credits from newer artists, including Rodrigo. This is somewhat of an industry standard, but it's frowned upon, and it's something that's actually a pretty bad thing in the music industry writ large. But when it comes to Trump using her music for posts on TikTok, no big hoorah from Taylor Swift. And yes, as Rolando points out, she sued Olivia Rodrigo and won big. So there's a song Olivia Rodrigo put out that has Taylor Swift in the credits and her team for the song that they said was similar enough. This opinion was essentially shit on by this subreddit. I don't know why we're giving celebrities this so much attention to be our political voice instead of actual activists and political figures. Mamdani and the Democrats who won this year didn't need Beyonce or Taylor to help them out. They needed to prove change. This is a very silly comment, and I'm going to tell you why. First of all, again, it's a non sequitur. It's a false dichotomy. Nobody is saying Taylor Swift should be the voice of the people. Nobody is saying celebrities should be our political voice. Nobody is focusing solely on celebrities, or very few people, I think, in the grand scheme of things, compared to how people portray this. It's just fully focused on celebrities and not on activists and political figures. Again, a lot of the people who focus the most on celebrities are the people whose lives are affected the most by pop culture, which would be young people who are in high school and in college, who are, making decisions about what they'll do on campus with their clubs based off of what's popular in pop culture, who are making decisions about what they want to do in life based off of what they've seen in popular art and popular media, based off of the public figures that they've drawn a lot of attention to, who they see themselves in. So yeah, they'll give celebrities attention, and that's not them saying, oh, but the United Nations shouldn't exist, right? I mean, the United Nations is a whole other conversation, but you get what I'm saying. The second reason that this comment is really silly is because Mamdani did work with celebrities. I mean, this isn't very hard to look up, guys. Zora Mamdani did a big video with the Wu-Tang Clan. Their team also brought on Jamal Bowman, The Lox, Run the Jewels, Jadakiss, and the Wu-Tang Clan to talk hip-hop and New York politics. And that's not the only situation in which Zora Mamdani engaged with celebrity politics. Mamdani just recently talked about getting roasted by Rami Youssef on Saturday Night Live. You want to know how many more of these we've got? Earl Manigault, the GOAT, basketball player, right? At some points he's engaged with FIFA, soccer, and sports. Tell FIFA to put game over greed. He did a whole thing with Mero, who is a part-time political commentator but is really a comedian. He's working with celebrities. He's platforming their endorsements. That's a thing that all politicians do. And if, in your words, a smart politician like Zora Mamdani, who proves that how they can win an election, is doing this very thing, engaging with celebrity politics and pop culture to a certain degree, then your argument is null. Your argument is just, it doesn't make any sense. But saying this kind of thing gets you a lot of upvotes on social media because it sounds good. It sounds good because you create, first of all, a straw man. You create a guy who doesn't exist, who only cares about celebrity politics, or just a guy that you know personally who only cares about celebrity politics and doesn't care about real politics. For instance, the kind of person who, again, will come in my comment section and be like, talk about things that really matter. You've seen the kind of content that I put out. I've done full-length video essays about Japanese fascism. I've done full-length video essays about Joe Biden. I've covered political issues. I've covered electoral issues. I've covered all manner of things. I've covered genocide. But as soon as you talk about a celebrity once, this isn't important. Some guy will always be like, this is important. Why don't you talk about the real issues? That's a straw man. I do talk about the real issues. That includes me engaging with celebrity politics. It's not the center of everything that I do. Okay? It doesn't stop there. Obviously, we can get into this over and over again. There's been some debate about whether or not Taylor taking legal action would be a good thing or would do anything. It would just bring it more attention. It would make Trump once again focus on her and bring more attention to the horrible video clips. The stated intent of the group is to use hit songs by prominent artists without permission to try and goad them into a public reaction. The only thing Olivia Rodrigo's reaction did was make her fans praise her and give that Ice clip 3 times more viewers than any other Ice clip. So again, this is the short-sightedness of when you do not have value for the little things, when you do not have value for the realities of political action, which is to have minimal impact that accumulates over time, because that minimal impact is better than zero impact. That minimal impact is better than allowing yourself to give way to whatever the political order of the day is. That minimal impact is important because it affects somebody. There are absolutely going to be people who are fans of Olivia Rodrigo who feel positively influenced by her political statements, including what she's done with the Trump administration here, and use that as inspiration to get more engaged themselves. Just because Olivia Rodrigo did not personally end all genocide that has ever existed does not mean that this action that she took was meaningless. Then you got this classic comment. Can we focus on the Epstein files, please? What's interesting too is somebody else is actually making the argument that I was thinking about making, which is that the Epstein stuff is a distraction from all the other wild stuff going on. This isn't actually what I think, but I think it speaks to the actual problem with people doing this focus on the Epstein files thing, right? I actually don't have a problem with it writ large. I think it's fine that people comment this on under a lot of things, but the problem when you comment it under something that is important, even if you don't think it's as important, but is important, is that you take up all the space that could be used to engage in all manner of different things, and instead just throw it at, oh, pay attention to this thing that exists, right? Spread awareness of this one thing that exists. So you undermine all these other important things going on because in your head, it's not possible to focus on two things at once. Celebrity politics do have importance. Thinking about them and talking about them, writing about them, giving them attention, God forbid, does not preclude you from talking about the Epstein files, from talking about Sudan. It does not preclude you from getting engaged in local politics. And again, many of the people who do engage in local politics might also have a pretty strong opinion about Taylor Swift. And I think that would blow your mind if you engaged with them. Hermie Torres says, it does feel like we're always told to hold weight onto multiple things that people are demanding we scale down to their personal major thing when it's all connected in some way. It absolutely is all connected in some way. You wouldn't go up to somebody who is an anthropologist with a specific focus on ancient civilizations in the west coast of North America and how they do political formations. You wouldn't go up to that guy. You wouldn't go up to that person and say, yo, this isn't important. What about the Epstein files? You wouldn't, right? Because you notice that, well, what he's doing is minute in a certain way, but it does have its importance. It does have its place. But for some reason, whenever it comes to talking about celebrities, it's, oh, this is the only thing you're ever focused on. And stop talking about it. You're distracted from the Epstein files. By the way, calling things a distraction is the biggest distraction. Calling things a distraction is so anti-intellectual. It is one of the main ways that we actually are anti-intellectual, is because we can't, again, think that multiple things can be possible and multiple things can be important. It has to be that everything is a distraction from the thing that I care about. Not to get bogged down on this, but again, America, I don't know what's going on with y'all recently, but when did Taylor Swift become the deciding force in your elections? So who the hell is saying that Taylor Swift is the deciding force in the elections? Second of all, I need people to stop doing this thing where they talk to America as this place where people got to get their shit together. If people gave a fuck about whatever country you were from, which many people I'm sure do, and took the time to figure out what people are talking about over there, there's going to be plenty of things that they could find that they might be able to dismiss as unimportant, including engaging with celebrities in their politics, okay? You wouldn't go up to a Brazilian person and be like, why do you care about José Aldo, the MMA fighter? Stop focusing on José Aldo and focus instead on the important things like who's going to win the election. Yeah, a person can care about electoral politics and they can care about street politics in Brazil, and they can also have an opinion about what a Brazilian MMA fighter says about Jair Bolsonaro. They can care about that. They can care about how they pledge, support to Jair Bolsonaro. They can care about what Anita says. And I guarantee you that there are people over there that do. Is there some position of privilege that comes with caring about those things? Sure. But none of us are the complete underclass, right? Because we're on social media debating things. So it's kind of rich whenever people come up with the privilege argument, as they sometimes do when they talk to Americans this way. It's pretty rich when people do that because it's like, who the hell are you to tell me on the internet that I'm being chronically online? My guy, you're right here with me. We're in the dirt together. We're rolling around the mud like two pigs. So again, this condescension towards Americans for having the gall to be able to talk about multiple things at once, it is a classic way to get upvotes online, a classic way to get likes online, even though it's something that can only work as a critique in specific situations. In this situation, yeah, it's kind of important to have an ongoing conversation about different things Taylor Swift is doing, the billionaire, the person who is affiliated, who hangs out with MAGA people, and whose lyrics are sometimes problematic, and who has engendered her fan base into this highly consumerist engagement. It is pretty important to talk about that, and that doesn't mean that the person who's talking about it doesn't care about local politics. This is such weird behavior. That Trump account used so many hits from so many artists like Kendrick, Chappell, Beyonce, Justin Bieber, Gracie Abrams, The Weeknd, Olivia Rodrigo. No one said anything about it until it was Taylor, and said explicitly they are baiting the media, and somehow the media just obeys the bait. No, Olivia Rodrigo was the person who had brought attention to this first, because she set a standard by calling out the Trump administration for doing this. Conversations about Taylor Swift escalated with regards to how the social media accounts are using her music. They escalated after Olivia Rodrigo did that. And some of that was cynical. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and argue to you that everybody who talks about celebrity politics online is doing so with the most noble intentions and the best execution. But are you kidding me? Have you any idea how many people in the black community have constant conversations about Kendrick Lamar's politics? I know y'all have debates about Chapel Roan and what she does with her platform. Beyonce has, in the past, taken issue. And she's also being litigated again for her political complicity in this moment. Any of these people can be critiqued for this. It's not just Taylor Swift. So maybe that makes me super weird, but I feel like it's actually intellectually important to notice sometimes what celebrities are doing with their platform. Trump literally admitted to wanting to provoke people with this. Why would she dignify it with a response when that's what he wants? Trump wanted to, how do I say this? Rico Pena says, when they ask for my reports at work, I'm going to say, what about the Epstein files? Literally. Cardamon says, it seems like a big problem is people putting celebrities on pedestals. That exists, but everybody who's critiquing the politics of a celebrity isn't putting them on a pedestal. They're bringing political attention to the political nature of their existence. They're having conversations about the political nature of celebrities, and that has many different facets, including how they engage with the Trump administration, among other things. Yeah, so what I was going to say is just because the Trump administration is trying to provoke people intentionally does not mean that you can't criticize Taylor Swift for being completely silent about how they're using her music. Just because the troll is trolling does not mean that we can't look at Taylor Swift not engaging with the Trump administration while she remains buddy-buddy with multiple MAGA people, including quite possibly, her current beau, who she dedicated her entire album to, her current partner, as well as her bestie Brittany Mahomes. It doesn't mean you can't look at that and say, yeah, I mean, she could probably do more. She could probably do something like what Olivia did. Frankly, if celebrities got together and decided we're all going to pull our music from these platforms until the Trump administration stops using them to put out Nazi propaganda, that might achieve something. But again, because you're letting celebrities get off the hook, you're so used to letting celebrities get off the hook, you're not even willing to think about what they could do if even 4 or 5 or 6 of them got together and did something. You remember when Taylor Swift made that, what was it that she did with Spotify, with the Universal Music Group? Right. Do you remember when Taylor Swift signed a record deal with Universal Music Group about the payouts, about UMG promising to hand over to artists on a non-recoupable basis a portion of the windfall from its Spotify shares in the future? Do you remember when Taylor Swift did that? These are different ways that celebrities, especially big ones who have a ton of resources, can think about how they engage with massive corporations and with powerful entities that have big says in politics to affect other artists positively. If, again, a couple of artists just got together and were like, yeah, actually, we're all going to just pull our music until somebody does something, that would be a significant protest. Celebrities aren't rich enough to get involved, LMAO. Taylor Swift is, and she definitely has the support and the backing of a large enough group of people to deal with any financial windfall from that. It's not like she gets the bulk of her money from Instagram and TikToks. People barely get paid for them shits. Posterman says, Trump did the equivalent of putting, if you're reading this, I won in his bio when he said that. Yeah, I mean, it's just like people are, and ironically, they're letting Trump win because they're just they're just fully thinking about things on Trump's terms. Oh, well, Trump wants this, so the only way we can do anything is by doing what Trump doesn't want. And anybody who does anything that's close to what Trump wants is actually the bad person. Instead of thinking about what can we do in organization to positively affect something. And so these are the kinds of comments that you get. This is a distraction. It's from the distraction from the Epstein files. I'm not a Swift apologist, and in general, I'm disinterested in most of what she has to offer, but he's tried to antagonize her for a long time. If she responds, she gives him what he wants. It's a no-win situation. Or she could leverage her platform to hit at illegal operations by a fascist entity. She could do something like that. People don't understand that all of it is performative. All of it. His reaction and yours. Oh, thank you so much, Pookie7460. Stop focusing on performative actions and reactions. Everything is a performative action. Your comment on a Reddit post about how other people are performative is about as performative as it could possibly get. It's basically a restaurant putting a sign in front of their establishment saying authentic food. There are many ways to engage with politics. This idea that the only way to engage with politics is, again, through this pure engagement in the ballot box and through meetings with local organizations. No, that's not the only way we do things. And yes, if you've got other things to focus on that you prefer to focus on, then do that. So all of this stuff is really silly. It's a really silly conversation, ultimately. And it's not the only time that this conversation has come up. It'll come up over and over again. And in fact, just a few days ago, Jennifer Lawrence was the star of this conversation. So in a recent conversation with the New York Times, this is from a piece from Variety aggregating, she says she doesn't know if she really should speak out on Trump and US politics to the press anymore. She says, the first Trump administration was so wild, and just how can we let this stand? I felt like I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off. But as we've learned, election after election, celebrities do not make a difference whatsoever on who people vote for. So then what am I doing? I'm just sharing my opinion on something that's going to add a fuel to the fire that's ripping the country apart. We are so divided, she told the New York Times. This rhetoric is pretty silly. Oh, you're preventing people from ripping the country apart? What are they ripping the country apart over? Maybe it's an important thing. I just think it's really silly when people overemphasize the polarized nature of the country. Of course, the country's polarized. We're in the middle of a massive political crisis. We are in the middle of massive global social crises, massive global political crises, and we're headed for a massive recession/depression. Of course, people are going to argue about it, And then she further says, I think I'm in a complicated recalibration because I'm also an artist. With this temperature and the way things can turn out, I don't want to start turning people off to films and to art that could change consciousness or change the world because they don't like my political opinions. So you want them to pay to see your movies. I'll take this comment in good faith because yeah, you do want to speak through your art, right? She says, I want to protect my craft so that you can still get lost in what I'm doing. And if I can't say something that's going to speak to some kind of peace or lowering the temperature or some sort of solution, I don't want to be a part of the problem. I don't want to make the problem worse. So again, like the implication here is that, for instance, somebody who is arguing that we should have universal healthcare and is very fiery about it in the media is making the problem worse because they're sowing division. I just think that's such a clear red flag for a person who is very disconnected from politics particularly that affect regular people, and is probably saying these things, again, with some of the coded language that she's using here, to substantiate why she wants to get everybody's money, to substantiate why she doesn't want to polarize audiences. I try to express my politics through my work. A lot of movies coming out from my production company are expressions of the political landscape, and that's how I feel like I can be helpful. Now, I don't think Jennifer Lawrence is a Nazi herself, and I recognize that, sometimes she'll say things that are fairly progressive. She's called out, she's said that it's a genocide happening in Palestine. I mean, I don't want to say, oh, the bar is in hell, but come on. This is coming after also, she came under significant fire for defending and remaining very close friends with an ardent Zionist named Amy Schumer. A lot of this stuff, though, debates. You can get into the weeds of it. What I'm really focused on is the fact that this gets praised. This kind of, I'm not going to comment, I'm a celebrity, I'm an artist, I would make the situation better. I think it gets praised way too much. This person says, honestly, I get her. At this point, I'm exhausted too. Like she said, this time around, people knew what they'd be getting. Trump said what he'd do. We saw the chaos of his first term, and more people voted for him this time. After the election, I definitely had this is what we voted for, I guess we write it out and try to clean up the mess when it's done reaction. So if I were an actress, I can imagine I'd feel like, fine, I'm just going to work and shut up. I get that this is an empathetic response. I get where, it's saying they get where Jennifer Lawrence is coming from, but I think that this is ultimately kind of a defeatist mentality. You're looking at this as if there's nothing Jennifer Lawrence can do at all if she can't sway an election by herself. It's not about swaying elections. People have, again, no foresight, no vision. Ironically, they betray a sense of interest in politics. They essentially reveal that they don't really get how politics works because they don't care about the small things, which are oftentimes not that small. Again, when we talk about the kinds of things these people can do with their platforms, the amount of resources that they have, they only look at it in terms of, if I can't change the world entirely tomorrow, then it's not worth it. I think that sucks. I think it sucks that people think like that, right? And the reality is that no matter what these people tell you, they think like that because this is how they react whenever celebrities literally proclaim to us that they're not going to engage with a bunch of different things that they could do to help people. Obviously, there are limits to what you can reasonably expect a person to do, including myself, including anybody else with a platform, including Jennifer Lawrence. But to be actively I'm not going to say anything about the Trump administration because I don't want to stoke the flames, I don't want to make the problem worse, and then I'm just going to speak with my art. I think that that's something that is particularly silly. I think that that's something that's clearly critiquable. Because what do you mean? You could engage with all number of fundraisers that could help raise funds for people who are starving. Which is not to say she doesn't do any charity, but especially if you're very concerned about there being a genocide in Palestine, there's more you can do with that. And it includes using your voice. Your voice is not completely unimportant just because it doesn't sway the election by itself. Boop-de-doo says they are all like, well, I can't be the hero and save everyone, so let me just not do anything and let people suffer, because even if it hurts me a little, I'll probably be fine. What I really like about your comment is the term hero, right? Because I really think that people think in these terms. These celebrities, they're thinking to themselves, well, I can't be the hero. I can't sway an election by myself. I don't like the fact that my power isn't as big as it should be every time that I, risk something with my platform. So I'm just going to stop engaging altogether. But moreover, all these people, all these commenters who praise this kind of mentality, I would argue that they're looking for heroes. They only think of things in terms of heroes and villains. I would argue that they're looking for heroes. And they're constantly heroizing, lionizing celebrities as protagonists. And so they're constantly thinking of things from the perspective of, well, the protagonist must only do what their job is, what their mission is, right? And if they don't feel comfortable doing something, then nobody should ever critique them for that, because they're Jennifer Lawrence, and she's done a good thing before. The inability to look at Jennifer Lawrence and say she can do good things and bad things. Let me evaluate what kind of power she has. Let me evaluate what she's doing, what she's not doing with it. The focus instead on, is she good or is she bad? That's the kind of thing that leads you to this kind of defeatist politics. I know everyone wants celebrities to speak up constantly, but I kind of see her side too. What good did it do? Trump got elected again, even with Harris receiving a shit ton of celebrity endorsements. Honestly, Agent Brittany, I just think this is a really entitled thing to say. Again, what good did it do? If you do something good, this is something y'all say all the time. It doesn't matter if it doesn't have the biggest effect. It doesn't matter if everybody supports you. It doesn't matter if 0 people are affected by it. You did a good thing, right? Isn't that what we say? Isn't that our whole moral thing, right? But this is where moral politics fall apart. Because as soon as it comes to, oh, well, I have to actually weigh benefits and negatives of what I have to do, then all of a sudden you have license to just avoid engaging with whatever you want because it doesn't have as much of an impact as you think it should. I will say first and foremost that I am a content creator with a small platform, and I have seen my ability to help people just by doing small fundraisers that raise a couple $100. I have been able to communicate with people who are like, yo, you've helped me a lot, thank you. And that means a lot, right? And part of that is my engagement with politics and my spreading awareness. I've had people in my comments saying, yeah, I've started a reading club. I've gotten more engaged with local organizations because of you. Even if it's just 2 or 3 people, that means something to me. But somebody like this Reddit commenter and others like them only care about whether or not you can do things that are impossible. If you can't do the impossible, then you should just do as little as possible. If you can't single-handedly sway the entirety of the political world, then you might as well just shut up. That's really entitled. You don't care about individual people enough. You don't care about these marginalized people enough. As a celebrity, you also get a lot more threats and public ire if you say something. If I post on social media, fuck Trump and fuck ICE, the only person I'm upsetting is my MAGA grandma. As a celebrity, you could very well have the orange blob in the White House post about you on Truth Social and get his cult followers to decide to do something. There's always references to this, and I'm not going to say that it's completely outrageous to say, hey, there's a fear factor, there's a safety factor, right? But if it's not completely outrageous, it's close. Because there has not been any substantiation, there has not been any evidence of a celebrity who spoke out about Trump and then was harmed, was killed, even had their career take a significant hit because they did it. Every time they do it, they get praise, they get invited to all these different opportunities, they might get excluded from certain clubs in Hollywood, but they also get other different opportunities. Their stock goes up. Trump complains about it online. They get some yelling people in their comments and then their replies, sure, and that's it. But then there's always these responses from people online because they're only thinking about the ways in which they can justify disengaging with politics. That's all this is. It's a roundabout way to disengage with politics. I'll explain. There's no evidence to say, oh, well, if Jennifer Lawrence says something about Trump, like she did before, like she did, when she talked about there being a genocide in Palestine, if she said something, she could get hurt. There's no evidence. We don't have any cases of celebrities having had that happen to them. If that happens, I promise I will change my tune. But we're not there yet. And in fact, we're seeing celebrities, many of them, be very vocal, often vulgar, about disavowing Donald Trump. We're seeing that. And what's happening to them? Very little. Oh, they're getting jumped a bunch on social media. They don't even use their social media accounts. This person says, I think celebrities can potentially use their platform to raise awareness about things that are not really getting attention. So if there is a charity that she cares about, but it's pretty small, it makes sense to promote it. Or if there's some kind of niche issue that she feels strongly about, she could get the word out. But I totally agree. Her coming out and saying her opinions about the biggest news stories really doesn't do much, if anything. And I think it is kind of odd how we expect every celebrity to constantly put out statements about the news of the day. Like, again, massive straw man. You never see these folks have a reasonable articulation of the opposite side. You never see them do that. They're always describing the type of person who critiques celebrities as being someone who literally thinks Jennifer Lawrence should sit on Twitter and 4 or 5 or 6 times a day just tweet out a hot take about something that just happened. And here's how I feel about the Epstein files, John Cusack style or whoever. None of these people are saying that. Jennifer Lawrence is volunteering to you, coming out and saying, I don't think I'll say anything about Trump. She didn't even not say anything about Trump. She literally told you what she thinks about the political situation and what she'll do about it. That's what happened. And you're sitting here creating this person because you're irritated, you're triggered, you're mad. I get it. You're thinking about people that bother you, and you're imagining that everybody who makes these critiques is that straw man, is that person who doesn't exist. But at the end of the day, you're making shit up. Nobody's saying that. DH Cultivator says to him, this stream is making me think I'm not woke enough at all. I might be cooked. I should be more woke, SMH. Don't worry about it. We're here to woke together. I need to get more woke. You need to get more woke. We could all get more woke. So again, imagine thinking to yourself, well, surely nobody gets affected by this because the election didn't get swayed. The election didn't change. The election didn't go the way that they want. So there's zero impact. I mean, again, this is that inability to engage with the lives of people that are marginalized, particularly young people of color, young women who have to live in this world. That all aside from like the kinds of things you could couple your speaking out with, that you could speak out and bring attention to an organization, raise funds. Ariana Grande shared a fundraiser for Gaza on her Instagram story, and the funds went up a ton like a year or two ago just because she shared it. So I just am so amazed that we live in this world still where we still make these excuses for celebrities that are literally volunteering to you that they don't care enough to say anything, that are literally volunteering to you that they just want to get their audiences, no matter what political views that they have. They don't care enough about fascism to use their voice, and they make up scenarios. You make up scenarios to justify it instead of just thinking to yourself, I think that's wrong. It does help to denounce him. It erodes the idea that he is popular. He isn't. Yeah, anytime you can just even do that. Even anytime you can even just allow for people to come together and say, hey, this fascist is unpopular, that has an impact. And as Trudeau also says, silence equals complicit. Oh my darling, I'm from South America. It's hilarious to me that people think art shouldn't be political. Bro, what do you think people did when my country was in the middle of a dictatorship? Make music as protest. Art is so fundamental to political rebellion. It is a huge part of Latin American history in the 20th century. Art is part of rebellion. Art is part of political revolution. But what happens, I think, sometimes is you have folks who grow up in the first world, who grow up in the United States, who are white usually, or surrounded by whiteness, have internalized it a lot. And so they just have no idea what these political histories are. They just disregard all of these different things because they have no idea what it's like to be in that position where you're being marginalized and oppressed. They just don't know. I think a lot of the times that's the case with these kinds of people. The last thing we'll touch on, we talked about Sydney Sweeney a long time ago. Turns out she's a Republican. Turns out when she was defending her family after them having the MAGA hats and the Blue Lives Matter shirts, that was a signal that she's a Republican. Turns out when Donald Trump praised her for talking about her genes, her eyes, the eugenicist rhetoric that was in that American Eagle ad, essentially, which a bunch of white people went online to say didn't matter. A bunch of white guys, including some of y'all faves on this platform, came out and were like, I don't think that the Sydney Sweeney thing matters. I think it's chronically online discourse. While there was all this evidence that Sydney Sweeney was this right winger, while Donald Trump was praising it, because again, they're not thinking about black and brown high school girls as important political subjects at all. They think anything that affects people that they don't know personally is chronically online discourse, but whatever. So we get further confirmation that Sydney Sweeney is simply a bad faith political actor. And if you haven't seen the clip, here's a segment.
There's a chance that somebody will get some idea about what you think about certain issues and feel like, I don't want to see Christy because of that. Like, do you worry about that?
No. If somebody is closed off because of something they read online to a powerful story like Christy, then I hope something else can open their eyes to being open to art.
We'll get
be
into
affected by that.
Yeah. You've come here like really willing to talk about this whole discourse that doesn't have that much to do with you, and I'm grateful for that. Is there something that you want to say about the ad itself? The Sydney Sweeney has great genes. Do you have...
The ad spoke for itself.
You think the ad spoke for itself?
Yeah.
Okay. And the criticism of the content, which was basically that maybe specifically in this political climate, like white people shouldn't joke about genetic superiority. Like that was kind of like the criticism, broadly speaking. And since you are talking about this, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that specifically.
I think that when I have an issue that I want to speak about, people will hear.
So you've seen some of the other clips from this as well. She's essentially trying to diffuse it. She's saying, I don't really think, I just like genes. And if I care about something politically, people will hear. And the fact that Donald Trump commented on it was insane. Using just this very ambiguous language to avoid outright saying any political position on an ad campaign that had very palpable eugenicist dog whistles in it. And it is what it is. We have the information about her political views, regardless of it, even if we didn't. Her coming out and not being like, hey, I'm not a eugenicist, just to be clear. And I don't support Donald Trump. I was just trying to talk about denim. That's kind of telling in and of itself. All of this is just putting the lid on a moment in time where, yes, a lot of people are taking the Sydney Sweeney thing as an excuse to just, bash a woman or whatever, to bash her looks, to bash her in a misogynist way, things that are out of line. That always happens when it comes to critique of famous women. It doesn't mean that these critiques of famous women are unfounded. It doesn't mean that they're chronically online. It doesn't mean that they don't affect people, because they do. We have the evidence to support that Sydney Sweeney is aligned with the kind of politics that woke people were reading into her ad campaign. This is the reality. And yes, Rachel Atwood, RIP Teen Vogue and what it meant for young women. Teen Vogue was a publication that had a lot of these conversations borne out on its pages, and now has been cut off because woke is dying. And I could have a whole separate conversation about news media and the death of quote unquote neutrality in this country. Another topic for another day. If Sydney Sweeney came out and, I don't know, said essentially nothing like Taylor Swift does about Donald Trump. If Sydney Sweeney were to have come out and said, I think it's crazy, but I just try not to talk about political issues. I try to focus on my art, like Jennifer Lawrence did, people would have been a bit more comfy with it. She tried to do that, but just through slightly hostile, not even hostile at all, but just slightly pressing interview questions, as well as the information that we already know about Sydney Sweeney, we were able to deduce a completely different thing from it, which is, this girl is absolutely pro-MAGA. And she's just not trying to say it outright. Obviously, none of us know her personally, but the fact is that she has become this propaganda symbol for the right wing in this country. Maybe not the biggest one, but one significant enough that the leader of that fascist movement has praised her for that. And I think that matters. And I think it was really silly for people to come out and act like this was based off of nothing. To assume that she was one of these kinds of celebrities, just like a Jennifer Lawrence or Taylor Swift, who is generally lib, and that people were just making things up out of context or just talking about things because they had nothing else to talk about. There are more important things going on that they were ignoring. I think it was really silly for people to do that. Because again, aside from all we've talked about, aside from the fact that you can focus on multiple things at once, this is how people get away with supporting fascism. This is how they get away with it. By saying little, by leaving ambiguity, by avoiding causing further controversy or further divides, they ultimately fail to use their power, their platform, to resist against genocide and oppression of marginalized people. But they benefit from maintaining some level of ambiguity in those spaces. This is how they do it. This is what happened under every fascist regime, and under fascist regimes that had way more threats of violence against celebrities. We're living in a time now where we have literally no reason to believe that somebody's just going to get neutralized as a white woman celebrity for talking bad about Donald Trump. We have nothing to go off of that from. And still, you have all these people who are very concerned about staying neutral and keeping their brand neutral and keeping their brand open. And you know why? It's because they don't really care. And I think it's important to highlight that. Do you know why? Because if you don't, then you allow them to continue to take up all of this space in pop culture, uncontested, and you allow all of these important perspectives from marginalized people who are facing the brunt of the way pop culture is being shaped to be silenced. And sometimes that's going to affect celebrities you like. I'm sorry. That's going to mean that celebrities that you like are going to get dunked on a little bit. Some of them are going to get dragged to filth for doing various things that are questionable. And that isn't something that should just make you defensive. That doesn't mean that those people just don't care about politics. They just want to see your fave get hurt. No. Your fave is problematic. Okay? Sometimes the woke stuff that you make fun of and you call chronically online and you relegate to Tumblr discourse, sometimes it's based off of really important conversations. And if you don't think it's worth your time to engage with them, then don't engage with them. But let's put aside this bullshit once and for all, that we shouldn't engage with celebrity politics, that their views don't matter, that every time we talk about them, we're fully focused on them and we have no care about the actual politics and we don't actually care about politics and it's all performative. Shut up. You're just being defensive. We know that you're just being defensive because when it comes to a celebrity that you dislike, even when they use this same language, you dunk on them. All it takes is a little bit of extra information coming out and a little bit of a bad feeling. And somebody like Sydney Sweeney can say something very similar to what Jennifer Lawrence said. I want to speak through the art, think it's silly, don't want to engage with politics. Dismissing those things. And because the way she sounds is dumb to you, instead of reacting to it with praise like you might do with Jennifer Lawrence, you react to it with disdain. And you say, oh my God, she's such a ditz. Oh my God, she's such a bimbo. And the whole time, you're just letting this thing wash over you. You're ignoring how these people have all this power and all this position right now and are choosing to do less than the bare minimum. Less than the bare minimum. Hoshino Ayame says, silence always benefits the oppressors rather than the oppressed. Whoever said that quote. It just does. And if that applies for your friend on Instagram, it applies for a celebrity that you like. I'm sorry. If you can get mad at your aunts and your uncles on Sunday dinner for trying not to be too political in this divided climate, then you can get mad at Jennifer Lawrence for doing that. You don't have to come up with arbitrary reasons of things that have never happened. You know, arbitrary excuses and all this easy upvote rhetoric. Oh, you just don't actually care. You're being performative. You don't have to be so defensive. That's the most defensive thing you can say. You don't have to do it. And none of this means that Taylor Swift is the most important political figure in the world. None of it means that. None of it means that. Yeah, Sydney Sweeney is also dating Scooter Braun, you know. ZT Lee's, the issue is that critique is so immersed with confrontation that people don't know how to sit with it. A large part of this is that people need to understand that critique is necessary for growth. Exactly. Because if you're not going to use your platform to speak out against fascism and to platform the marginalized, then at the very least the marginalized are going to just do what they can to bring that attention forward, to bring those critiques forward. And these celebrities have the money and the resource. I mean, I'm repeating myself over and over again. It feels like a conversation that just is never going to end. I think that what it reveals when we look at the comments we were talking about, when we look at their excuses and the worldview that they share in these comments about, oh, this doesn't sway the election, and I actually think celebrities should just talk about the most niche things that are not controversial. What it reflects is the exact kind of mentality that got Trump elected in the first place. The exact kind of mentality that has made this country the imperial fascist regime it has been to so much of the world for a very long time. It is that exact mentality. It is the mentality of the good citizen. It is the mentality of the banality of evil, right? It is the mentality of passivity. It is anti-intellectualism. Everybody wants to talk about, oh, anti-intellectualism is on the rise, but they never want to interrogate when they engage in anti-intellectualism. If you are so defensive and dismissive of any critical conversations about celebrities, what that makes you is anti-intellectual. Because instead of engaging with intellectually stimulating conversations, you choose to only focus on the most outrageous stuff and become defensive about it. And this is a huge part of how the depoliticization has happened. Like Ellen K. Toana, I'm sorry if I don't say your name right, A Link to Anna, maybe? Celebrities used to protest on the street, as in Diane Keaton. People are bringing up Jane Fonda. Celebrities were more political before. Frankly, famous authors like James Baldwin, famous musicians, famous actors, Marlon Brando, Sidney Poitier, especially in the first half of the 20th century when, before the Red Scare, celebrities didn't see themselves as celebrities first, but they saw themselves as artists and as concerned subjects. And many of them used their platform to connect with politics. And nowadays, that is so much less common. It still exists, but a lot of it has been discouraged and de-radicalized because that's what these capitalists and these governments want to do. Anyway, I could talk about this at length, but again, every time that you get the urge, last thing I'll say, to dismiss something as being little, as being inconsequential. Just remember that there's a lot of things you care about that could be seen the same way. And try to have a level of empathy and a level of political thought to say, where can this matter? And how can this matter? And how is this linked to these systems of oppression that maintain their dominance over all of us? But for the love of God, please, in 2026, let's stop defending celebrities like this.